Kim.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council and municipal staff that the meeting is being live streamed to the public. All council meetings are also recorded. Recordings will be available to the public on the township website. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is not permitted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The purpose of the meeting is the Council for the Township of Madawaska Valley deems it advisable to hold a special council meeting as allowable under section 3.6 of the procedural bylaw 2018-117 to review and approve meeting minutes, bylaws, and reports. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest?
None here.
I have one, and it's under closed meetings, item number 11.1, item number 3 regarding the Great West Life Benefit Package. Because of Teamster, I'm a Teamster member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other declarations? Sue, you can't declare.
Just wish to confirm we've received the signed in form regarding that declaration from Council Bromwich.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, is there anyone else who needs to declare? Not seeing anything. Okay, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. The recommendation is that the special council meeting agenda for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020 be approved as presented. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilbur, seconded by Councillor Schulist. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, this morning we have a delegation. Oh, and we've got both of you from Pinch and Limited. We have Tim and we have Jake. Oh, Jake, your mic is muted.
We don't let Jake talk.
Oh,
Good morning. Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
no, well, it's good to have you gentlemen in this video way that we can do this. I guess we're going to go through all of our landfill and waste annual reports this morning. So do you just want to start with the first one on the list and go through any questions the council has? How did you want to approach it?
I could make an attempt at, I did a PowerPoint summary. I could make an attempt to share the screen so you guys can see that. I think that would really help us convey the information. If that fails, I can walk us through site by site if you're comfortable with that.
Okay, I know I will have questions for in each. Well, I don't know for sure each and every report,
Okay.
number of them. So I do want to go through some of them in depth just to make sure I understand. I'm sure council as well, but how about we start with the PowerPoint if we get the screen share to work?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give it a whirl here.
Okay.
All right. It's coming up here. So just let me know if you guys have it at your end.
Yep.
Okay, Tim, we have it.
Wonderful.
Just a slight delay, that's all.
Okay.
We should be good to go.
I'll just flip through it. So as you've introduced me, I'm Tim McBride, professional geoscientist, director of landfill and municipal services here with Pinchin. This is not a part-time gig for me. Landfills is what I do. It's my primary role here at Pynchon. And I've been focusing on the field of hydrogeology and landfill monitoring, landfill design for the last 23 years of my career. I just recently joined Pynchon in 2017 after you guys had already awarded Pynchon the contract. So it was nice. It was nice for me to walk into a new position, to provide a fresh set of eyes on the monitoring programs that you guys had going on at your 5 sites. And I think with that, I've been able to, provide a little bit of insight as to, where there's opportunities for improvement, where there's opportunities for cost savings from an operational standpoint, as well as the monitoring standpoint. So just real briefly, landfill principles. This cross section, or like it's a layer cake depiction of what goes on at a typical landfill site. So if we work our way from left to right across this figure, you always want to have an up gradient well. You want to figure out, what the water quality is before it comes in contact with your landfill, and then you have your landfill, and you have water that percolates through the waste, and then as it continues to move, you have a number of wells that monitor the plume and the performance of the natural attenuation processes through the groundwater table before you either reach another receptor, like another homeowner or something that's on a private well, or ultimately in Northern Ontario, our main discharge is always a surface water body, and there's a lot of surface water bodies in the vicinity of your landfill sites. So for the most part, that is the receptor for all your landfills is the landfill leachate would ultimately report to surface water. So this is the way that all your sites are designed. This is the way that this is the way that they're also approved. So this is an approved process through the ministry, and principle there is they understand water is going to filter through the waste deposits and pick up some contaminants, and then as it moves through the ground, natural processes take place and filter the water back into a cleaner state. The trigger for us is that by the time it reaches the river or your property line, the water will be at certain limits. So for the most part, we want it to either meet drinking water standards or provincial water quality objectives, which have been set for protection of surface water features. But we never have a situation where, like, I'll just pick a random parameter, iron, for example, the limit is 0.3. We would never set the trigger for your site at 0.3, because if you fail 0.3, you're already out of compliance. So what we do is we use what they call the reasonable use concept, and that's a level program that's been derived by the ministry, and it's on the the background condition as well as the MOE standards, and it kind of, if the limit would be 0.3, well, your site specific trigger would say be 0.2. It's a little bit more conservative, and the reason for that is if you were to fail your B7 criteria, it allows you to take certain actions at the site, do certain things in order to make sure that you're not in a position of non-compliance at your property line. So I started off with the Bark Lake site just because it's your active site, and to be honest, I went into the medical order. So yeah, the site, like I said, is your active landfill site, and We've done a little bit of work on this particular property. In 2019, we were commissioned to fly a drone survey. So you can see the high res image that I've embedded here within the Google Earth imagery. And what this imagery allows us to do is every single pixel that the drone picks up when it's doing its flight is equivalent to a survey shot. So instead of having a survey crew go out there and walk the site and do transects and pick random spots to get survey data, what we've done here is, we have millions and millions and millions of data points here. So we have a very accurate understanding of the topography out there, as far as the waste contours as well as some of the surrounding. So this particular site has a large groundwater monitoring network. I think we're up to 23 wells right now. And those are depicted on this particular figure by the little yellow squares. And then the blue triangles are the surface water monitoring stations in the adjacent creek, which would be the receiver on this site. So one of the very first things we do when we go to the site is we measure all the water levels in the wells. And the reason we do that is we want to establish what the surface of the groundwater table looks like. In general, it always follows topography, or it mirrors topography very much. So, it wants to flow downhill. It wants to report to the creek that's adjacent to it. So in this particular site, the flow is from the highlands to the, on the eastern extent towards the west. So this confounds our findings a little bit, in that some of our trigger wells, like the series here, MW14, 17A and 17B, as well as 14, 16A and 16B, they're on the west side of the roadway here, and they can pick up de-icing contaminants like sodium and chloride and TDS. So in general, for Bark Lake, what we did here is we sampled it in May and October as per the license or the permit for this site. Background wells indicate that there is a naturally exceeding values for alkalinity. And then as we work our way through this, we notice that there's several landfill derived impacts right in the immediate vicinity of the site for things like iron, manganese, barium, total dissolved sodium and chloride. The sodium, chloride, and TDS in the trigger wells are, like I said, are potentially attributed to de-icing activities. And as we continue to, we are going to do trend analysis and stuff like that, just to see how things compare to the site, the actual source wells, because there are ways that we can, for lack of a better word, fingerprint the water types and figure out, if it is landfill site derived, or if there are other anthropogenic sources that may be causing issues. With the exception of barium and nitrate, all the exceedances of the trigger criteria are non-health related parameters, meaning that, they've been established through the drinking water quality guidelines just for making them easy to treat, or, for aesthetics, like you don't want high iron because it'll, stain your fixtures in your house and stain your laundry. And you don't want high manganese because it'll stain things black. So, but really there's no health related effects with those. And typically in our experience when dealing with the MOE, they don't want to see a lot of action associated with things that are not health related. It doesn't mean that we have a blank check and we can do whatever we want. It's just as a municipality, we don't get forced into action on stuff like that. So real quickly, this is a summary table from within our report. it just goes through some of the exceedances on a well by well basis, kind of on a cross section, or working from the landfill towards the downstream receivers. So you can see in the springtime, we have a lot of hits in the 14-17 series wells for alkalinity, aluminum, barium chloride, sodium, TDS. And like I said, I think that's associated with road salting activities, because by the time you get to the fall and those effects have kind of dissipated, the only one you're still seeing is chloride, and that's because it's very prevalent. Like it just stays for a long time in the aquifer. So yeah, these are the things that we see as far as failures. So in general, the surface water, which is the receivers, is sampled, at the same time as the groundwater, which is really good because that provides us with a snapshot in time of how the groundwater may be interacting with the surface water. In addition to that, we're also mandated to sample in the summertime when the creeks may be at their lowest level, when they would receive a lot of base flow from the groundwater. So the ministry likes to see that summer event because that's kind of an indication of worst case scenario. So in the down gradient receivers, we have a couple site specific trigger exceedances for barium, boron, some of the major ions, iron, manganese, sodium, sulfate, and zinc. So, and by major ions, I mean stuff like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And again, those are not huge things, but they do tell you a little bit of the story as to what's going on this particular site. So for recommendations that were derived out of this program, we'd recommend sampling groundwater spring and fall, continue with that program, as well as spring, summer, fall for surface water. There's a little bit of redundancy in this program in that monitoring well 7, 10C, 11A, and 9-15A don't really lend anything additional to this particular monitoring program. Now, if you're not using wells in your program, you have to get ministry approval before you can take them out of the program. And then once they're out of the program, if you're not using them at all for anything, you actually have to decommission them. And there's a lot of, well, not a lot, but there's money that's associated with that. You have to get a licensed well driller in to actually properly decommission these wells so that they don't provide a conduit for contaminant to move vertically through the aquifer. So what we would recommend is if we're going to take these out of the program, we just use them for water levels so that we can still characterize the flow system, but don't spend the money and don't spend the time sampling these wells anymore. And that would result in probably a couple $1,000s of savings potentially. Now, in well nest 3A/B, and when I say well nest, that's a pair of wells. One's in the shallow aquifer and one's in the deeper aquifer at the same location. In that well nest, that's very, very close to the toe of the landfill, we've recently seen the presence of benzene. Now, benzene is a component of petroleum products and solvents and that sort of thing. It's a known carcinogen. So it's not untypical to see these types of things in landfills, but we would recommend, given that we found that there, we would like to add the VOC parameter suite, continue it at this particular well nest, and then there's two more well nests in line with that location and the river. We'd like to, also do VOC analysis at 9A and 9B and 14A and 14B, so that we can confirm that it's not getting to the river. And then lastly, as I talked about before, we are going to recommend a trend analysis, which is just a fancy word for graphing. We want to graph the concentrations over time for nitrate and barium for all future reports for well nests 6, and then 14-16 and 14-17. And again, that just allows us to provide some interpretation as to how things are performing at this particular site. So I'll take this opportunity to pause if there's any particular questions about Bark Lake.
Okay, I can't see Councillor Bromwich, unfortunately, at the side of the screen. Did you have any questions, Councillor Bromwich?
No, I'd just like to comment if I could. The report sounds very comprehensive here. He's pretty well laid it open that there's not really a serious problem at Bark Lake. And I think that would reassure a lot of the residents that there is not any danger of leachate getting into their groundwater, which we've had phone calls on and people inquiring about it. The nice thing is to decommission these wells, but to still maintain them for water level use is a good idea. That will save us money in the long run. And yeah, that report is, it puts my mind at ease. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there anyone else on council who has any questions or wants to discuss anything on Bark Lake? Councillor Wilmer.
Yes, like Councillor Bromwich, it's good to hear a positive report, and I think that's what I'm hearing. I do want to ask more because reading through the 900 and some pages, it's hard for me to understand everything. But when I look at the report, I do get a sense that the landfill site is doing well, and things are being controlled properly. Is that, I guess my direct question is the site in good shape? Are there any potential things we need to worry about in the future that perhaps don't show up obviously in this report? I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna, there's a big punchline at the end, of course, of the whole presentation. I mean, with this particular site being your only active site, and you know, this council and this township has been very, very proactive in you know, investing in this asset, right? And I deal with a lot of municipalities, and I often have to battle with council to justify spending and investments in the landfills because, you know, it's just a dump. However, once you don't have this asset in your community and you have to start looking for a new one, or you have to start shipping your waste to another municipality and paying all fees, you quickly realize that you know, and people often wish that they would have handled their site a lot better. Now, I've done a lot of work with Hillary on this site, and we spend a lot of time when we prep these reports, providing them, you know, the ministry required data for how the site's operated, and, you know, where did we fit in 2019, and where are we proposing to fill in 2020. And then as you continue to work through that, you end up with, you know, a viability assessment as well that we're going to talk about near the end of this presentation. But one of the things that I would really recommend is, you know, that this figure that I'm showing right here, the yellow box, is the approved landfill footprint, and that's where you're allowed to put your waste in. And one of the things Hillary and I have been working on is how do we maximize the volume of waste that we can actually put in that little box, and you know, what areas can he fill to capacity now, and, you know, progressively close potentially, you know, like put a solid cap on it, so that, you know, if you go back to my very first slide where we talk about landfill principles, the driving force for this whole thing is the water that filters down through the landfill. If you eliminate the water that filters through the landfill, you eliminate the generation of the leachate plume, or, you know, not eliminate it, but you minimize it, you reduce it, and that's going to have a positive effect on your environment. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not a tree hugger. I love landfills and I love waste management, but there is a bit of a science to it, right? So there's two two big positives to taking a very scientific approach to waste management and the operation of the site. One being the environmental benefits, and the other is the financial and the economic, benefits. If you hold off on closing this and capping that landfill site at the very end of the life, you have 3 hectares of landfill here that you would have to reshape all of it potentially to make sure that it complies with the MOE standards for 4-to-1 side slopes and a 20-to-1 crown. Then on top of that, you have to put on either 2 feet of clay or an engineered system, which would be like a foot of sand and a liner, and then another foot of sand, and then 6 inches of topsoil. So it doesn't sound real fancy, but when you start to do the math on the amount of earthworks that are involved with, 3/4 of a meter of earth over a 3-hectare landfill footprint, and the cost quickly escalates, and you're looking at, to close something like this would be in the millions of dollars. So what we want to do is, while we operate the site, is work on a progressive closure. And as cells are filled, you make sure that your operators are filling them at the 4-to-1 side slope so that you don't have to spend money on reshaping. And then once they reach their final elevations, that's all designed. You put a cap on top of it so that you eliminate the groundwater that can go through those old wastes, and you alleviate that liability down the road. And that all goes through to the auditor every year. So if we're able to show the auditor, yeah, like 10% of this landfill is already closed and capped properly, we can take that money off the books, right? This particular site is at, we estimate it is at about 35% capacity, but we don't have any areas of it that are permanently closed currently. So.
Okay, thank you. If I could just follow up with my second portion, it's a little bit different, but we mentioned the benzene earlier. What I'm just interested in, that's something new to the landfill site, and how is that caused? Is it just something that was perhaps put into the landfill, or what causes something like benzene to suddenly show?
Yeah, it's it could be something that's benzene has a long life in groundwater. It's not something that decays, and there's not a lot of natural processes that there's not microorganisms that eat away at it or stuff like that. So yeah, it could be derived from anything from paint to if you had a gas station in your community that when they decommissioned the gas station and they brought the contaminated soil there, could be where it's from, or it could just be poor practices with maybe some resident threw some liquid in there, some old waste oil, some old it's hard to see where it would come from. But yeah, the guys have to be very careful when they're receiving loads and receiving waste to make sure that they know what's in it. And even the gas station scenario that I described, if your site is allowed to take that, for example, I'm not even sure if the license allows it right now, but there's even measures that you need to go through. Like you wouldn't just bury that material. Ideally, you'd want to use it as an interim cover so that you don't have wind-blown litter and you don't have bears digging through their garbage, that sort of thing. But typically, what we would do is we would spread it out really thin and kind of let the petroleum volatilize before you want to minimize the amount that goes into the ground, right? So.
Great. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Was there anything further than on Bark Lake that anyone wanted to ask? Okay. Tim, I have questions specifically in the report. How do you want to deal with them? I can speak to the specific page if you have the report in front of you.
I do, yep,
Okay.
sure.
Just, if you want to complete Bark Lake, then I just want to get clarification on a couple of things in the report. The first one is on page 10. And it also appears in the cover letter. You refer to MW14A and MW14B as wells, but I'm not sure. Is that BH 14A and B? Are they just been renamed?
Yeah, let me just double check here. Yeah, that's B, 14A and 14B, that's correct.
Okay, so I guess it's just not consistent with how we named them everywhere else. So I'm wondering if that should be changed.
Yeah, no, that's probably not a bad idea because all the historic data would be,
Yeah,
whatever the nomenclature was when we took over the program is what we should continue with.
right. Have you ever seen these drawings that were done for us originally when Pynchon did a pitch and did a review of our landfills? They're really simple drawings and they're really easy to follow. I don't know if they were shared with you.
What's the title of them?
Environmental peer review drawings. They were done back in 2016.
Yeah, I'm sure Jake has those. Jake, do we have that stuff? Jake?
Yeah, we have those on file for sure. Yeah, that would have been early on for sure when we started the program.
Okay, I don't know, but as a council member, I find them really easy to work with because sometimes the aerial stuff is really nice, but if I have a drawing, when you refer to a well, I can kind of get a sense of where it is. So, you know, I've often worked off of that, which is the only reason why I noticed that if there's a difference in name, then it sort of shows up because I'm looking for it on the drawing and can't find it. Just to explain why I would pick up something like that, wouldn't normally. On page 12, I just wanted to ask about BH10C, which apparently was flooded last spring. That seems really weird. It talks about it being, the water level being above ground.
Yeah, no, so that wouldn't be necessarily flooded. The water within the pipe was above the ground surface.
Oh, okay. Okay, I just wanted to understand because it was a real oddity that stuck out for me that it would be, you know, above. So everything else refers to below ground and this refers to it being above it. So
Yeah.
it's inside the pipe, it's come up, eh? Okay.
Yeah, so within the pipe, the water level is higher than the ground level. So, you know, people refer to that as artesian pressure.
Okay.
And we, you know, that well is, I'm not sure how deep it's drilled, but, you know, probably down at 30 feet, the hydraulic head at 30 feet, you know, wants to push the water up. And it kind of goes back to, this principles here. You know, you have your water that goes down and then it wants to, the thing that's missing on this is that, you know, there should be a little arrow that goes up to the river. There's always going to be a discharge up to the river.
Okay, I'm glad you could explain that because in my mind, I thought if the water level's above ground, do we have a situation where we have water pooling? Because we did have the stormwater issue a couple of years ago. That's why I'm checking.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Okay. And then you talked about BH6A and B and I think BH13A and B in the report. And I think that's about page 44, page 45, exceeding the trigger mechanism criteria. So when you mentioned before about the trigger mechanism, is it set below the actual level that becomes a concern for the MECP? And we're somewhere between the level where it would be a concern and the level that triggers it? Is that where we are right now?
Yeah. So what we, and again, those particular wells are within the site footprint. And the true trigger wells are the ones that are on the other side of the road from the landfill site. But those ones there really help tell a story because they potentially are not, because they're up gradient of the roadway, they shouldn't show as much of an effect from de-icing activities or road salting.
Okay,
There probably is a bit of a halo associated with the roadway. Like it's not like you have a line that everything on the up gradient side is going to be clean. But again, like when we do that trend analysis in the future, that'll help us delineate, whether we're seeing effects from the road or true effects from the landfill.
okay. This is helpful, trust me, because when you've read through the report and you're not an expert like you, it can be confusing, and I'm really appreciating the clarity you're bringing to these issues, or these things that I thought might be issues and I'm not certain about. So on page 42 of the report, you recommend that landfill monitoring of gases be discontinued, and that doesn't appear in the final recommendations or cover letter. I'm wondering has that just been missed, or should it be included?
Yeah, I noticed that as well when I was putting the presentation together. And I think that recommendation has already been put forward to the MOE, but it certainly would not hurt to reiterate that. And I think Jake and I should add that. And yeah, so what we do, when we take the caps off the wells, before we even do the water levels, we actually take a gas vapor reading within the wells. And to date, we haven't seen anything. And there's nothing on site or off site to protect. It's not like there's neighbors that have basements that, landfill gases could accumulate in and create issues as well. Even on site, there's no structures that are, directly on ground surface or have a basement. So really there shouldn't be anything there that could accumulate, that gases could accumulate in. And on top of that, we're just not seeing that in the wells. We don't see any levels in the wells.
Okay, so maybe we should reiterate that point with the MECP.
Yeah, I think so. Jake, are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll move that down in the recommendation section as well.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great, thank you. I think you answered the benzene question really well, because, as soon as any member of council sees something new popping up, it does sort of make us have a bit of a concern. We do have a reserve in place that we're trying to build on for leachate, and any questions we might have at some point where we have to address leachate and capture it. But it's nowhere near what it would need to be in order to actually put a system of some sort in. At least Hillary has mentioned that to us. So, I think that's why council's expressing the concern about the sudden appearance of the benzene.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like to start to do a pump and treat system, or even a passive, flow through system to treat benzene would be very, very expensive here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just have one final question on this one, because I have the drawing that was first done. There's a few wells that no longer appear in the report, and I'm just assuming they've been decommissioned. So it's the BH5A and B, and BH10A and B, and BH11B. Have all of those been decommissioned, or have they been sort of removed from the sampling but are still there?
Do you have that information?
Maybe Hillary has it.
Well, that came from the original one, right? Kim?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just trying to update my drawing, so going forward I know what isn't there anymore.
So the best advice, Tim or Jake, is take the original pension drawing and cross-reference it with what we have on the wells.
Okay, I've done that. It's just these ones were on the original drawing and now they don't appear in the report. We decommissioned some of them?
Not at Berkeley.
Well, I have BH5A and B. Yeah, 10B I've never seen, and 11A I've never seen.
Can you point, Tim, on 5 on that drawing that's in front of us?
Yeah, right here. 5 is right here. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, 5 is right here
Okay, I see it. Okay.
yeah, and 11 C and B are up here,
Mm-hmm.
and then 10 A and C are right here.
Right, there was a cluster of them. Okay, so
Yeah.
some of them aren't there anymore? I just
That's
wonder if you
right.
could check and get back to me. Just I'd like to know if some of these aren't in use anymore or aren't there.
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
can we can do that. I think our crew is planning on being there in the next week or so, so we can get them to confirm that whether they're physically even there.
Mhm.
And if they're not, we can make the, update those records and that reflected.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, is there any other questions on Bark Lake from council?
No.
No,
Councillor Bromwich? No, okay.
no,
I thought you were
I'm
gonna
good
go
with
up.
it. Thank you.
Okay, I can't see Councillor Schulist.
I'm
Dave?
here.
Okay, are you
Yes.
with Bark Lake?
Well, the first thing I want to mention here to you, Madam Mayor, is that, Tim, having said that this is an asset, absolutely. In this time where environment, we have to be environmentally responsible. I think that is definitely something that we can actually say this is a true asset in Madawaska Valley. And we're really depending on Fincham to give us all that information, and you've done an excellent job. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Great. Tim, did you want to continue then?
Yeah, for sure. So so the next one I wanted to talk about is Barry's Bay. This particular site, we've done a lot of work at this particular site in that we've decommissioned a number of wells in recent years. We've got approval from MOE to do that, take them out of the program, and we decommissioned them. These were ones that were problematic in that the wells were not in good shape. They were going to need work anyways because the casings or the superficial seal was compromised. Rather than spend all kinds of money fixing them, especially since they aren't really lending anything to the program, we had these ones removed. So in this particular drawing, you can see the removed ones are the ones that are circled in red, and you can see from the groundwater flow direction here, they were kind of cross gradient from the landfill anyways, so they were meaning that they aren't in the direct flow path, or there's other wells that are in the area that, were more or less doing what they were serving the purpose of those wells anyway. So they were just a lot of duplication there. So we took some of those out. So, yeah, so again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the groundwater flow will often, mirror the shape of the land. So in this particular site, the flow is to the northeast, and small little tributary or creek you can see in the photo here that kind of winds its way at the toe, and that again would be the ultimate receiver. So if I just double back here, you can see there is a surface water monitoring program upstream and downstream and a midstream site. So we have a good feeling of what the water quality is before the landfill impacts would touch it, what the landfill impacts in the immediate vicinity would do to it, and then downstream, how are things being attenuated. So this one's very short and sweet. Not a lot of issues with Barry's Bay. It's a closed site, so the monitoring requirements are not as they're not as much required at this particular site. So what we have to do here is sample groundwater once in the summer, and we sample surface water in the spring and the summer. So at this particular site, we have groundwater, drinking water standard exceedances of alkalinity, iron, and manganese. And we have guideline B7 exceedances, which again, it's the reasonable use concept / the trigger monitoring program, the exceedances are manganese, iron, and total dissolved solids. So all of those parameters are all established for, if you were to drill a well here and you wanted to treat the water for use for your house, they're all water treatment issues. They're not health related issues. And really there's not a lot that would any additional work here. And again, the receiver in this area is the surface water at the toe of the slope, and the exceedances of the provincial water quality objectives, as well as the aquatic protection values. So on this particular site, we do the provincial water quality objectives, which is, protective of fish and stuff like that, but also recreational uses. And then we also look at aquatic protection values, which are the limits that would protect fish and microorganisms and stuff like that the fish need to have a habitat. The only exceedance that we see in surface water associated with the site is iron, and that's not a huge issue. And I think we see iron in the background well that's slightly elevated as well. So this is one that we're just going to monitor, but there's not a lot of huge issues here. So the recommendations are, continue to do the spring or do the summer groundwater, do the spring and summer surface water. This particular site, they do VOC analysis, and that means volatile organic compounds. So that would be like your benzenes and toluene and other carcinogens. At this site, when we sample for that stuff, everything comes back below the limit of what the lab can detect. So, the standard for benzene is 1. The lab reports it at like 0.0001, and they're telling us that the concentrations we're seeing here are below what their machines can actually detect. So in that regard, there's never been a VOC issue at this site, so we want to remove the VOC analysis from the program. And the reason that's important is VOC analysis, it costs you about $60, or Jake, I don't know, you can jump in. It's somewhere between $60 and $120 a sample. So it would be nice to strip that out of the program just because it's not adding any value. The other thing, because this is a closed site, this particular site, the ministry was asking for a pretty regimented inspection of the landfill and the cap to make sure that there's no leachate seep or breakouts or anything like that. This is really well vegetated. The cover is, the vegetative cover is pretty prolific. So I don't think that you need to be spending time and resources sending people out there to look at this site over and over and over again. I think if you did that, if you had Jake or his crew do it, to do the spring and summer sampling events, I think that would be more than enough. So that's what we would like to recommend to the MOE on this particular site.
Okay, thank you. I mean, as you've been out to that site, you know that it was closed a very long time ago. It just took us a great deal of time to organize getting enough of a contamination attenuation zone in the municipalities as a part of our property. But yeah, there are trees on this site, significant trees growing right on the landfill. So certainly what you're recommending is fantastic, and we don't really, I don't think anyone has any concerns. We were just glad to get it finally closed and to sort out all the issues with some of the wells that were, some of which had been damaged, or as you say, couldn't even be found. So it's really nice to see the work that's been done, and that you now have a plan in place going forward for us to be able to monitor it. Is there any questions from council on the Barry's Bay site? Oh, Councillor Wilmer?
Mine's more just I did have a question on the VOC analysis, but Tim answered that very well. And I just wanted to comment, it's nice then that we're at the stage where we can start discontinuing things like that and start saving significant money on that. So it looks like we're in good shape there. Thank you.
Okay, other members of council, any comments or questions on this one? Not seeing any. Okay, Tim, can we just go quickly to the report?
Sure. Yeah.
A couple of things in the report I wanted to either ask or sort out.
Okay.
You have it? Okay, on
Yes.
page 27 of that report, it refers to the site as an operating landfill. I think that's probably a carryover from the Bark Lake report. Could we identify that it's closed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It really popped out to me because of the trees, as I say, that I recall seeing on it the last time I was there. And then on page 28, you mentioned a submission about biennial reporting to the MECP, and that wasn't captured in the cover letter. Maybe that was done previously as well.
Yeah, what we like to do, and my boss doesn't like it because it's cutting my own throat, but the ministry, I don't know if you guys see it, I'm sure Hillary does. The ministry, demands that municipalities provide these reports every year. But they only get back like every third year and say, oh, hey, we reviewed your report. Well, we reviewed your last 3 reports, and this is what we think. So for the closed sites, what we like to do is we don't push too much on the monitoring program. We cut out what we can and we modify it as we need to. And that's not where I want to fight with them. But one of the things I like to do is cut the monitoring reporting, to, especially on the closed sites, to every second year, so that we can provide a summary letter to council and staff, obviously, to let them know how things are performing, so there's no big surprises. But I just feel like sometimes it's a waste to provide a whole document of 900 pages every year when they're only reading them every third year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they've been really receptive to that, and we have a number of communities where they've agreed to the biannual reporting, because it takes work off their table too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Okay, is it something then that we should make sure is in the cover letter and in the recommendations that you're recommending that it go biennial?
So that was on page 27, you said?
Sorry, one sec. Page 28, I think,
Okay.
of the report.
Make sure just wanted to double check it just to make sure I'm not making too much of a promise here. So
It's near the top, inadequacy of the monitoring program. For council, it's page 317, but I thought I'd refer to the page number in the report for Tim's sake.
yeah, no, that'd be good. That'd be good. That I think that's a sound recommendation as well. We got to make sure we capture, Jake, we got to make sure we capture the cessation of the landfill monitoring for gases as well, if it's not. If it's
Okay.
not letter. Okay, great.
All right. So you've provided us with all the wells that we now have on that site. So I can assume that anything that's not on the list in the report, either we can't find it or it's been decommissioned.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding as well. So.
All right, fantastic. Any other questions on the Barry's Bay landfill from council?
No.
I'm not seeing any. I got a thumbs up from Councillor Bromwich. All right, let's carry on then to PAUGH Lake.
Okay. So PAUGH Lake, and I apologize for this figure, but I just wanted to give everyone a snapshot of the site. And you can see this monitoring network is pretty far reaching. There's wells that are, all expand all the way down to the lake. as well as a surface water monitoring program, which is represented by the triangles. Those are all your surface water monitoring stations. And then you've got a kind of a cluster of wells that are focused around the site itself. And then you have these other ones that are further down gradient that help us, delineate or confirm how well the natural attenuation processes are performing before we get off-site and off the property line. So this is the groundwater flow direction based on the elevations of the water table from the monitoring wells. So yeah, this one in particular, again, we do a spring and summer groundwater event. We had everything, satisfy the Ontario drinking water standards or the B7, with the exception of, alkalinity, pH, hardness, iron, and manganese. Again, those for the most part are just naturally elevated in your area, and that would probably be the argument that I would make with the MOE reviewer if there was ever a pushback on this one. Your trigger level B7 exceedances at this site are alkalinity, pH, and iron. Again, nothing health related, no real concerns here. So at the property line, we've determined that the site is in full compliance with the MECP, B7 criteria. And that, again, that's all derived site specific to this site from the background well, and et cetera, et cetera. So we also did surface water monitoring on this property, and that happened at the same time as the groundwater events. And the exceedances included total phosphorus, phenols, pH, and iron. And then we had aquatic protection values exceeded for iron at a couple of locations as well. So in general, there's not a lot here that's, I don't think that we've identified anything here that we would attribute to a landfill derived effect. So this one here, I think, is in pretty decent shape as well. We're just saying, we're just recommending to continue the surface water and groundwater programs as is during the spring and the summer. Now, this particular site, you'll notice that we have a high-res image in here that we've embedded in here, just a little postage stamp. I'll go back to this one, and we have details on the topography and stuff like that on the site. When the boys were up to fly Bark Lake, Hillary had them also go over and do a 10 or 20 minute flight on this particular site, just because he wanted to confirm the slopes, because this site had been capped and closed recently, and he wanted to make sure that we had something that would be representative of like an as-built survey, because that's one of the things that the ministry asks for after you close the property. So there were areas that were previously closed on this site, unless I've got them mixed up, that the slopes were a little bit more than the MOE standards. Like the most you're allowed to get away with is like 3 to 1. And I think there was some side slopes here that exceeded that. So what we're going to do on this particular one, and it's not included in the annual water quality monitoring report because it's not a water quality issue. When the boys go out, we're going to spend some time and put some particular attention to observing those slopes to make sure that even though they exceed the MOE standards, rather than go out there and spend all kinds of money reshaping stuff that's already been, well established and seems to be pretty stable, we're going to go out there and just, document spring and summer conditions and make sure there's nothing that's happening out there that would cause groundwater, issues. So we have to be careful though, because, like we talked about at Barry's Bay, when you have large trees and stuff like that growing on a landfill, Sometimes the MOE doesn't perceive that to be a good thing. Reason for that is if you had a tree that was on a steep slope and the wind pushed that tree over and uprooted it, and the root mass came up and took the cover with it, now you have exposed garbage, right? So that's what we're going to look for. We're going to just, make sure that there's no trees that have fallen over and are causing these gaps in the landfill. But like I said, this one here is pretty good. And again, this is a closed site, and sometimes it's really hard to swallow spending money on a closed site. But again, this is something just to protect the municipality. And this little drone survey, the exercise that went with it, I think was very, very good. Spend of a couple. I don't even know if the guys charged us for this one. I think they might have just did it while they were there for Bark Lake. So.
Okay. So any questions from council on the PAUGH Lake waste site, closed site?
No.
Okay, Dave, no. Carl, no. Okay. Just in the report. Okay. I'm gonna double check where I'm at too, because with all these documents together, it's pretty massive. Okay. So again, do I assume that any wells that aren't listed in the report have been decommissioned or can't be found?
Correct.
Because there's a few of them that aren't listed. Hopefully they were properly decommissioned. When we get to that monitoring and checklist at the end of the report, there's a page there that I'm just wondering, I think it's the 5th page in. So I can't give you a page number because it's at the very end of your report.
Okay.
Add up. Here we go. It talks about trigger values for contingency plans or site remedial actions being exceeded. And it says, yes, I'm hoping that was supposed to be a no. It says have trigger values. Okay, I got a little note over top of it. Maybe double check that.
Yeah, I'm just open it
Yeah,
up.
that should be a no there.
Okay. And then about the 11th page in, there's another one. Let me just see if I can find it. Okay. It's about 11 pages in. It's number 9 of what section? Sampling and monitoring program results, WDS conditions and assessment. Again, there's another one that has a yes checked, but then there's no information. So I'm assuming it should be a no as well.
Yeah. There's no surface water issues there at all. So.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I've made those changes right now, live
Good.
here.
Fantastic. No, if I see them, I just want to mention them because you just want to make sure when it goes into the government that every box is ticked, even though they may not look at it for 2 more years.
Oh.
Or so.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a lot easier to do it right now than to try and explain them after the fact, why something's it says yes, but it doesn't jive with the report, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And the report is great. Is there anything further on PAUGH Lake from council?
No.
Seeing anything? Let's carry on. Which one is next? Radcliffe.
okay, Radcliffe. So yeah, closed site currently uses a transfer station. So this one here, we have some surface water monitoring stations along the river, and then we have a number of monitoring wells. Actually, pretty limited number of monitoring wells to cover this site, especially if you look at the former landfill footprint. The monitoring wells are pretty much follow the road I guess that was the easiest access to put them in. And they do serve the purpose, you know, to monitor the effects between the site and the river. But you know, not to ruin the ending on this one, but there is some work that needs to be done on this particular site, unfortunately. Like I said, groundwater flow is to the northwest towards the river. You can see that from the contour plan. So this is a spring and fall groundwater monitoring event. So on this particular site, you know, we have Ontario Drinking Water Standard exceedances for alkalinity, chloride, hardness, TDS, dissolved organic carbon, iron, manganese, as well as VOCs. And 7 exceedances, we have alkalinity, aluminum, chloride, DOC, TDS, nitrate added to the mix, manganese, iron, as well as VOCs, because anything that fails your drinking water standards would by default fail your V7. So it's not in my bullet here, but it would include VOCs as well. Mm-hmm. So surface water monitored in spring and summer on this site, and it's assessed versus the provincial water quality objectives only. So on this site, we had chromium, phenols, and aluminum that fail. Aluminum is probably an anomaly. It has to be sampled on or tested on a clay-free sample and have to be filtered to 0.1 microns. So it's potential that there may be some clay that was in the sample, and that's what's resulted in an elevated aluminum. Phenols we see from, you get that from a lot of organic decay. So if you had, you know, a high, you know, leaf load, for example, you know, decaying leaves and stuff like that, you can see phenols be elevated. And chromium, you know, people get excited about this one because this is the whole Aaron Brockovich thing, but it's not likely reflective of what's going on the site. Now, this site does have some issues, but I don't think that chromium is the issue. The issue that I have at this one is VOCs. We have benzene, 1,2-dichlorobenzene, and there's another VOC that's slipping my mind right now, but there's a couple of VOCs that we see fail at MW5-2. So that's directly adjacent to the river. This particular site, we continue with the monitoring during the spring and the summer for groundwater, and the fall, sorry, just to continue as per the permit. There's no recommended changes to it, with the exception that we'd like to continue to do VOC analysis at the MW5-2. So that's all we wanted to put in this particular report, just because there's not enough data right now to, you know, cause any big concerns or any, you know, or have any big action. So what we want to do is collect a little bit more data before we cause a big stir about this one. In reality, you know, if you think back to my very first slide about the landfill principles, the way that your very first thing that you want to do to control leachate generation is put a cap on the landfill. Well, given that this site is already closed, that's already been done. So it's possible that the leachate plume and this VOC exceedance that we're seeing may be truncated already from the former waste deposits. So it might be that there was a benzene plume starting to develop here, but once we put the cap on, now that that source has been not eliminated, but it's been, you know, isolated, and now the slug, let's call it, of elevated benzene and VOCs is just gonna, you know, pass essentially. I, you know, based on what you guys do on this site currently, you know, it's a transfer site. I don't think that there's anything associated with the current operations that are causing these exceedances. And in groundwater, we don't see stuff like that, you know, happen that fast. It's not like, you know, you're going to spill a little bit of oil on the ground, and I'm going to see elevated concentrations down here at the river 100 meters away, you know, within a year. It would take years for the groundwater plume to move that far, and for us to see concentrations that are measurable because of all the dilution potential and everything else that happens within the aquifer. So I truly feel that that these effects are related to the former, you know, waste cells here, and this is something that I think the township should try and get a better handle on as to what's happening here. So we actually submitted a proposal, and we'll get to that later. It's in one of the further agenda items. Submitted a work plan to do just that, to delineate, you know, where this is and where this plume isn't, and whether or not the plume has been truncated from the landfill, and is it something that's just going to pass, or is it something that we need to invest some more time and money into, and figure out how we're going to mitigate the effects.
Okay. Are there any questions from council on the Radcliffe waste site? I know we've seen this report before, and thank you, both of you. Everything that we sent back in terms of input, everything is checked and great. Any questions at this point?
No.
It's, oh, Councillor Bromwich.
Yeah, thank you very much, through you, Chair. We are going to address this issue later on as a recommendation, as you were saying, so we'll discuss it then. When you start hearing benzene, you know, being released in the leachate, it kind of sets off the red flags a bit. And I know there's mitigation that can be done to kind of neutralize it. We'll just see how big a deal it is when we get to it. Okay, thank you.
So Tim, in terms of how big a deal it is, based on the fact that as you described it as moving like a slug, could the benzene have come from the time before the landfill was closed and capped?
Correct. That's what we're assuming right now. Yeah.
Okay. So it may not be an issue that's going to get bigger. It may slowly fade away, but that's why you want to test.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So we can talk about that one when we get to that report. What's our next one? Well, no. Huh.
All right, we'll know. This is just a snapshot of what the monitoring well network looks like out here. There's a number of wells on this particular site. There's potential effects from the Highway 60 because the groundwater flow direction, as you can see here, goes to the southeast primarily. So there's and we do see in borehole 2 or monitoring well 2 elevated chlorides and stuff like that, that you know, based on the groundwater flow direction as well as the position of the waste deposits, we wouldn't expect to see chloride in that well. So this is a site, again, we do a summer sampling event, and for the most part, everything is in really good shape here. We have B7, or sorry, Ontario Drinking Water Standard exceedances at only 2 wells, and that's for total dissolved solids only. And then for the B7 hits, we have, again, TDS hits at a series of wells, BH2, which is the one right by the highway, and then BH4A, 5A, 5B, and 8. And then we have chloride hits at BH2, 5A, and 5B. So if you look at this system here, you have your BH2 well close to the highway, and you have your 5A, 5B here, you know, not really lined up very well with the you know, former landfill operations. So it's likely that everything we're seeing at BH2 and 5A, 5B are more related to road salting activities. And that's the gist of the final bullet here is we haven't identified anything significant at this site. And, you know, the elevated concentrations of chloride, sodium, and TDS are probably, you know, related to the road salting activities on the Highway 60 road corridor, as opposed to landfill operations or transfer site operations. Conclusion or recommendations, we'd like to continue sampling once per year. We'd like to submit the report every second year. We've already submitted a program revision, I believe, on this site that we want to remove borehole 2, 5A, 5B, and 8 from the program. And so if and when the MOE approves that, either we're going to keep those wells in and use them for water levels only, or we would decommission them or phase them out when it's convenient for us. We would have to, the boys would have to look at the wells, you know, and make sure that they're in good shape and justify us leaving them there so that they don't cause you know, they're not going to be problematic, and that if they're in condition that's compliant, then like I said before, we'll just leave them in so that we don't have to spend money on them.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's it for Wilno.
Okay, is there any questions from council on the Wilno site?
No.
Councillor Bromwich?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to say that's a relief to see that this transfer site is working well, because we have the Byers Creek watershed system that runs right adjacent to it. And it's always been kind of on everybody's mind here that whatever goes on in that leachate would affect the Byers Creek, which serves most of our drinking water for the town. So it's good news, and I appreciate what the pension has done here. And I think it's great news to hear that we're going to decommission these and possibly go into an every 2-year cycle of monitoring. And that should save the township a little bit of dollars for sure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. Then I guess my only questions were in relation to the actual report itself, and just, again, I'm not sure that the boxes on that final monitoring and screening checklist, a couple of them didn't make sense, so I just wanted to ask. So I'll let you bring that one, get that one in front of you, Tim. So it's the second page at the bottom. It's been ticked yes for have any measurements been taken since the last reporting period that indicate landfill gas volumes have exceeded the MOE limits. Notice that in the report, so I'm assuming that one should be a no.
Yeah, definitely.
Correct.
Okay. And then, gosh, 10 pages into it, there's another one I was going to question. This is, our agenda moves really slow because it's so big. Okay. It says sampling and monitoring program results at WDS conditions and assessment. It just needs to be ticked no, I assume. There's no, the yes or the no weren't chosen there.
Sorry, which second, where's that, sorry?
Sampling and monitoring program results, WDS conditions and assessment, that page.
Okay.
Part 5 at the beginning, there's neither yes nor no was ticked, and I guess it would be no because you listed a parameter. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jake, that's in the surface water section, Jake.
Yeah, I just found it here. Okay.
Yeah, so
Item 5.
yeah. So the reason that that isn't checked off is because there is no surface water program anymore at this site. It was discontinued in 2014. So I still have to certify that, you know, that there's nothing changed here. Like, we're not recommending using the surface water monitoring program. So that's what I have to certify. But yeah, Jake, we can put that in as a no or put it in as a not applicable.
Okay.
And then the rest of the section you can go through as well, like even on that page further down, item number 6 and number 7 and stuff like that. We need to check off no or not applicable all the way through.
Okay.
And then, yeah, once you get that saved to the server, I'll re-sign it.
Okay. Oh, Hillary.
Hi, through you, Chair. Moving forward, Tim and Jake, we should page number these things at the end. Is there any way to do that?
So those are MOE generated forms. So I'm kind of
okay. So you answered my second question. So those are MOE CC checklist system. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they just recently came out with those. I think they first introduced them in 2011, and then they kind of phased them in. And now they want to see them appended to all monitoring reports. And it is pretty important that the information in there is accurate, because that's their first thing they go through, is they go through the checklist, and then depending on what's in the checklist, they flag it or you know, assign it to certain specialists, because they don't have somebody who reviews the whole report. They would have somebody that would review it for waste management, and then they have somebody else that reviews it for groundwater, and then they have a whole different section that would review it for surface water. So depending on what's in that checklist and what they see there, it really determines who they distribute the report to for senior or technical review.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else on the Wilno site from council? Any other questions? I think we're all good. I'm not seeing anything, Tim. I guess we can move on to our next one, which is the landfill closure estimate document.
Yeah, this is everyone's favorite. So
would you like to
Hillary?
through you, Chair, if Gwen could get Amanda on, because this is her document for the auditing.
Do you guys want to skip ahead to the other two items, or we can get her at the end? Or
okay, we could do that. Why don't we do that? And in the background, staff can arrange for Amanda to be ready.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll skip that one for the moment and do proposal for Hydro-G review at Radcliffe.
yeah, I think that's probably a good idea, because it's fresh in everyone's mind anyways. So, so what we proposed here is to do a bit of a Hydro-G evaluation or hydrogeologic evaluation associated with those VOC hits that we see in the river at MW5-2 at Radcliffe. And as I've indicated here in the first bullet, like this is not something that's been mandated by the MOE. It's more of a due diligence exercise for the township, so that we can get an understanding of how, what the extent of the issue here is, and if it needed action or it needed some sort of management, what that would look like, and what the potential costs would be. And the reason I want to get ahead of this, and we're not trying to hide anything from the government or anything like that. I want to get ahead of this so that the ball's in our court. And the reason we want to do that is, we can schedule stuff that's convenient for us. We can go out and drill the wells now, as opposed to doing it in the winter, when the costs are more expensive, and if you have to run water to deal with heat hands or stuff like that, like you just run into all kinds of problems that really, really drive the costs up. So what I would like to do is, or what I would recommend the township do is kind of take this on as a proactive approach, so that you guys can control the schedule and it's not ordered. Like if the MOE gets involved and issues an order and says, by this date, you will do these activities, and by this date, you will do this activity, the township at that point starts to lose control of the program, and the costs could start to escalate. So what we've recommended here is we'll generate a standalone document that's going to characterize the groundwater in a little bit more detail than the existing monitoring network can provide. As well, we're going to supplement that with a more comprehensive surface water monitoring program. And we put that all together in a separate document, so that once we have a better understanding of the situation, we can present that to the MOE and say, hey, this is what we've seen, and these are the steps that we're taking to investigate it and to develop some strategies or options for how we're going to deal with it in the future. So having said that, the other thing too is if the MOE reviews of the current report and they pick up on the BOCs and they're not comfortable with it, when they come to the township and say, hey, this is a problem, it'd be really nice to say to them, yes, we've identified that as an issue, and here's our action plan. This is how we're addressing it. I think it puts in a really good light if we show that, we don't necessarily need them to force us to do work. We're going to take care of things in our own community, and even though this is a closed landfill site, we understand that it's going to require some maintenance and some care going forward. So just in summary, what we're proposing to do is drill a couple of wells around BH5-2. So what we'd like to do is flank the existing well nest, drill one to the north and one to the south, so we get a feel for how wide the plume is that may be going to the river. And then in addition to that, I want to drill one. We can't go any further down because we're already pretty much right next to the river, but I'd like to go upstream between this monitoring well location and the former landfill, so that we can see if the plume has been truncated from the source, which would help us determine whether or not this is an issue originated before the site was capped. And then once we have this, this monitoring program in place, we can continue to monitor it over time, and we can see if things are dissipating over time, and that slug is passing, and things are improving naturally, or do we need to have a more aggressive approach to treatment and collection here, or whatever other options we can come up with. So what we would also do is include some VOC monitoring in the surface water program. And we would add a monitoring station upstream and downstream of SW4, which is directly to BH5-2. So all this speak is just about we want to figure out how big the plume is, and is it having an effect on the surface water body. So the lion's share of the cost here is the drilling. We have to go out there and drill these wells to I can't remember what the meterage was, but Jake and I pulled it together, and I think everything's got to go somewhere between 20 and 30 feet deep to get to the target depth and be similar to what we saw at BH-5. And that way we can, we're comparing apples to apples at that point in time.
Okay.
And then the bottom line or the punchline to it is, yeah, the cost associated with the drilling and then all the lab analysis and everything, it comes up to about $22,000.
Okay. So does council have any questions at this point for Tim on this proposal? Oh, Councillor Bromwich, is your hand up?
I do. Thank you very much through you, Chair. I concur completely with this valuation request. I think getting ahead of it like this is a really proactive approach to take with due diligence. And once the MOE gets hold of something that we haven't looked after, it becomes horrendously expensive and prolonged. I think by being proactive and putting this as part of our report to the MOE, we'll show them that we do recognize we might have a problem and we're doing the best we can to mitigate it. I would really like to find out why there is benzene leachate coming out of there, and this is the only way to get the answers for it. So I concur 100% on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilmer.
Yeah, I think more than being proactive, I think we know we have an issue that needs to be dealt with, and I think we have an obligation to start looking at it. And this seems like a good way to start. I think showing we're being proactive is good also for the MOE. My thoughts on this, or my only concern is what would happen, or what are we going to get out of this? Like if we had this in place for 1 year, what are we going to know at that time? How long will we be monitoring it? And is there a potential that the MOE could ask us right away to do more, given what we know?
Yeah, no, that's a valid question. I mean, typically, we like to see a minimum of 8 data sets. That's what's considered, statistically and scientifically defensible. So, if you were to say that we're going to sample, spring and fall on this site, that's 4 years of data collection before we would, come up with a plan. The MOE might say to us, hey, we're not waiting 4 years for you guys to dream up a plan here. Go collect spring, summer, fall for 2 years. And then once you have that data, you're going to have to come up with something. So I think in this program right now, I can pull it up here. I had it handy for myself. I'm pretty sure that Jake and I had estimated a couple of rounds this year. Yeah, so we were going to do the surface water, the complementary surface water program in conjunction with the existing program. And so that would be summer and fall. And groundwater, thought we were going to do, because this site here, we only have to sample once a year. So I think we were going to do spring groundwater, summer groundwater. Yeah, right now we were just going to do a spring and summer groundwater in the new wells, as well as pH 5-2, where we've already seen some issues.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And as I said, I think, we have identified this. We are, I feel, obligated to do something on it. So I think this is a good way to start. And yeah, I certainly support doing.
Oh, okay. Councillor Schulist.
Yes, to you, Madam Mayor, I definitely agree with this here and support it. Have we budgeted for this here, or is there something that's been put aside for situations like this?
I'm wondering if Hillary could respond to that question. He might know more what's budgeted.
In monitoring, I believe we would have some covered, but we would have to find other sources within our, we wouldn't have enough to cover that 22.
Right. I think we have a landfill rehabilitation reserve.
Yes.
So there would be an opportunity at this point to cover the cost out of that reserve, I would imagine, Councillor, if that answers the question.
Very much so.
Okay. So at the moment, this isn't something that was planned in our budget, but we could manage it without any changes to the outcome. Okay, are there any other questions on this at this point, or any comments? All right. Okay, I'm going to ask just a couple. Tim, would all three of the new wells then be on our property, on municipal property?
To be honest, I'm not sure what the property lines are on this site. So I think I can show you real quickly on the map what I was thinking of. So on this one here, can you guys see my cursor, my little arrow?
Yes.
Yep.
So this is the well nest here where we see the issue. Nest doesn't seem to have an issue, so we probably put it, in between those two. And then the same thing, there's nothing at MW1, so we'd probably split the difference and put it down here. So we might be able to put it in the road right away. And then the last one was going to go between the well and the former waste deposit. So yeah, that one we definitely could put on your property.
Okay, it looks like they would be then, if that's where they're going to go.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So you already sample upstream and downstream of SW4?
Correct.
So you're adding 2 more sampling points?
Yeah, so those would be in very, very close proximity to, so we'd probably put them, similar to where we're going to put the well locations, the supplemental well locations, just so that we can focus on this area of the river and make sure that there's nothing, nothing going on there, that we're not seeing anything in the river. Because by the time we're at SW5, our concern is that, the effects would be diluted out. And while that's great, and everyone has that old saying, dilution is the solution to pollution. But in the ministry's world, that's not an acceptable practice, right? So they actually turned that phrase around to dilution is not an acceptable means of pollution also.
Okay, so is SW3 then giving you your background? Because it's
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's way up here, so.
Yeah, it is. It's a long ways away. That's why I wondered. So, okay, this makes a lot more sense to me now because of the concentration of where you're focusing the effort and knowing where it's going. It is going to significantly increase our costs every year if we're looking at around 7,000 to do this extra monitoring. I don't know, am I wrong in that? Or I was trying to get that from your proposal. I was trying to get an understanding of what our impact would be annually.
Yeah, so Wrong one here. I think, so what we'll probably be looking at. Yeah, it's probably about $5,000 a year that it would add to the program, because we wouldn't need to do the, preparation of a hydro-G and site assessment report every year. We would just fold that into our annual monitoring report.
Okay. All right, so just Hillary, you need to be aware that going forward, we'd have that additional cost based on changes to the site. I mean, I have no concerns with doing it. I just want to be cognizant of where it's going to impact us so that we plan properly. Is there any, oh, Councillor Wilmer, I just saw your hand.
Yeah, just on that point where we do have the additional costs, or will have the additional costs monitoring there. I think in some of the previous ones that we looked at, we also reduced some of our costs too, or potentially will. So maybe it will offset to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yes, hopefully if the MECP finally gets around to reading the reports and acting. Okay, if there's nothing further on this, what else do we have?
The last proposal that we had, Madam Mayor, for the sequential fill plan for
Yes.
Bark Lake. So, like I talked about when we talked about Bark Lake and the asset that it is, and you'll see it when we start to discuss the liability then estimates, and especially when you start to see the difference from last year's estimates to this year's estimates. A lot of the difference in the dollar amounts is associated with accuracy of the data that we have. So for one thing, we did a drone survey in 2019, so we have way more data than we would have had with some guy out there with a survey rod doing traditional surveying. So the level of accuracy that we have now with respect to the volume that's in that site as a major implication on the liability estimates, because a lot of it is derived from how much capacity, of the permitted capacity of the landfill, how much have you used? So now that we've made, we've really refined that, we know that, you're at about 35%. Now the next component of that is, and the other thing that really drives the cost is how many years do you have left in that landfill? So like we have an old survey and then we did a new survey and we compared those two surveys, those two surfaces, and we said, okay, well, the old survey happened 2 years ago, and the difference in the volume between the two surveys is 10,000 cubic meters. So we're bringing in about 5,000 cubic meters a year. So if you assume we have 50,000 cubic meters left, that equates to 10 years of life. And I'm just speaking, just giving examples. These are not accurate numbers to your particular site. So you develop that waste deposition rate, that average annual waste deposition rate, that has implications on the projected lifespan of your asset, right? So then that has massive effects on the cost, because whether you're amortizing it over 10 years or 40 years, it is totally different, especially when you have to start applying the MOE interest or inflation rates and discount rates and that sort of thing, right? So the more accuracy that we can put into the input data for that financial model, better off we can be. So this progressive, and then the other aspect of it is, like I talked about before, if we can develop this landfill and operate this landfill in such a way that give Hillary and his crew the tools to cap and close cells of the landfill once they reach capacity, we can then put in a line item in the financial estimates that says to the auditor, hey, you know, we're at 35% capacity by volume of this landfill, but we've actually capped and closed, you know, 20% or something like that. We can then take that off the books. So we want to do that. We want to be able to provide you guys with a management tool to you know, the lifespan of this landfill, for one, to protect the asset, and for two, allow you to, you know, reap the benefits associated with accuracy in your liability costs, as well as, you know, reap the benefits of the environmental positives, right? Like by putting a cap on certain aspects or certain areas of the landfill, you're now reducing your leachate generation rate and that sort of thing. So what we wanted to do, and this is an example, we've done one for a different municipality. So we have, what we have here is we flew a drone survey and we have their waste pile. And you can see here the slope is very, very steep. It's not the standard. So that means that they're going to have to go in and reshape waste and spend money having guys push garbage around with a bulldozer when they could have just placed it properly in the first place, right? So this is, I just picked cell 3 to 5, but this is cell, you know, cell 3. These are 4 to 1 side slopes and a 20 to 1 crown. And then cell 4, you can see it's not a big change, but we've added a little bit more down to the bottom here. So we've pushed cell 4 down. So one thing that shows is, you know, in cell 4, we're talking about 2,500 cubic meters of waste. And because this municipality brings in so little garbage every year, that actually equates to 2.5 years of that they'll be working on this cell for 2.5 years. And then they go to number 5, cell number 5, they skip back up here to the north end and they recontour and shape that. And you can see this one, they actually have a deficit of 500 cubes, meaning they overfilled in that area, or the slopes are not accurate. So they actually have to pick that garbage up and move it somewhere else. So they're going to end up eating up, you know, some life of a different cell. So this is the gist of the whole thing, is of what we want to do for Bark Lake, is we want to provide you know, a plan for Hillary and the guys that operate out there to what areas they need to fill. And then once we reach these final grades, we can look at, you know, putting in cover material, and we never have to go back and touch those areas. We're done with them. And it's important though that we, like I said, the word optimize, and everybody wants to use these fancy words, but it's important that we do optimize that area, because if you have an operator that says, yeah, we're good there, you know, we're supposed to be at 252 meters of elevation, we're good. And then you cap it and you close it, or you and say you were short by a meter. Well, the amount of money that you have to spend to reopen that cell just to gain your worth of landfill volume is a real, like, it's a tough pill to swallow, because as we talked about, landfills are so valuable, and it seems to these guys that, you know, operate these sites and push garbage around, it doesn't seem very important to them, but to us and to people that are you know, trying to protect these assets and get as much out of it as we can. You really have to give these guys the tools to succeed, or else it's nobody's fault but our own, right? Oh, that's the end of that. So anyway, this particular, to do a sequential fill plan, a progressive closure plan, is about $7,500. And in the end of it, you're going to get a whole series of these drawings that will show you in each individual cell of the landfill development, you know, what the volume that goes into that cell is, and how many years of life are estimated in each given cell. And it really provides you with a nice projection of how the landfill is going to develop, and it provides you with opportunities of where you can cap and close and start to, reduce your mitigation. The other aspect too that's really nice is if you do have issues at Bark Lake in the future, like from a water quality standpoint, and the MOE says, okay, well number 3 has benzene, what are you doing about it? Well, we're doing a progressive closure. Like we're going to fill areas and we're going to cap those areas so that we can reduce the amount of infiltration, reduce the amount of leachate generation. Again, it's just one of those proactive things where you just give them that, you give them that confidence in the municipality or the township, sorry, that you guys are doing the right thing. And I don't feel that that's smoke and mirrors, that like that's something that I honestly believe in, that it is the right thing to do.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Hillary, did you want to? Hillary.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I love this approach. Unfortunately, in this year, we have a few challenges, COVID-19 being one of them. And there's been some transitions within the employees. And this is a technical way of burying and covering. So I would suggest that we table this till next year until we get a handle on COVID-19 and our transition with some employees. We have different waste site attendants and so forth. Not that they couldn't attempt something like this, but I would feel better if we left this till 2/21. Thank you.
Hillary, is it possible to do the planning for it this year? Because there would be some planning obviously involved in determining based on what we currently have, how best to approach this so that we actually had a plan in place that we could begin to follow next year.
Well, I believe this plan wouldn't take that long to make. So I don't know, Tim might be able to speak on this, like within probably 2 months or whatever, and then we'd be challenged with trying to conduct this bury and fill approach.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, Jake or Hillary, did the 2020 drone survey, has that been approved?
20.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
within
so-
our budgeted numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as long as that is done, that gives us that difference between the 2019 and the 2020. That's going to give us an accurate depiction of the annual, waste volume that is received at the site. And then there is, I understand what Hillary's saying. There is a real risk here if Jake and I were to, let's say we fly the drone in May before too many leaves are on the trees and we get the best data that we can get. And then we develop this plan, and we now have a plan sitting on our desks, and we're not following it. That potentially looks a little bit shady, or like I'm just trying to think how it would be perceived by the MOE, for example, if they came in and they saw that we had a plan and we weren't following it. So maybe what we do is we do the 2020 drone survey like we had planned, and maybe we do shelf this for a little bit, and then it like Hillary said, this is not a huge exercise for Jake and I. Most of it is desktop. We spend a lot of time with the AutoCAD guys trying to figure out what the best way to lots of times we do it with like almost like Lego blocks to figure out how do you fill this thing, because people really struggle to visualize this stuff in 3D, believe it or not. And once it's, once we get that laid out, we just have to translate that into the drawings. So yeah, once the plan is done, then you could have Jake or I come down to the township, sit down with the operators and walk them through it and show them, this is cell number 1. These are the slopes we want to obtain, and so on and so on. I guess the risk is the longer we drag this out, there is the potential that areas could get overfilled or underfilled, but I mean that's just the risk we have to take. And I think if we do the survey as a minimum, Jake and I can look at that and have discussions with Hillary and staff and just say, hey, based on the survey, you're still okay, or you've overfilled a certain area, or you're still, you still got volume. But I really do. I know Hillary would love to see this thing happen, but if we had to defer it, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it could be something we could plan to do in 2021.
I believe so.
Yeah, just one thing to add on the survey, guys. Our last survey was the fall of 19. So what I had in mind was to complete the 2020 survey a year later. So it would be the fall of 2020. So perhaps over the winter of 2021, we could develop the plan to implement it spring of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, that timing would really make sense, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
When did they do the fall survey? Do you remember, Jake?
It was November. So I'm thinking we should give it some time for the landfill to get some volume before we refly it. So it makes sense to sort of wait to fly it in the later part of 2020.
So here's the kicker for us is what impact on the landfill is the pandemic going to have, right? So if the landfill receives a large volume of waste in the summertime because of all the cottagers and stuff like that come to the area, it's hard for us to predict like what influence, like are we going to still see that traffic in the summer? Are people still going to come to the cottage? Like that's the risk I guess there is to it. But so we'll have to take this year's results with a grain of salt, right? Like if we survey in November and let's say last year we said that we received, I think the number is 2,675 cubic meters a year is about what we receive at Bark Lake. If this year we only see half of that, if we were to use that number and divide that into the remaining life or volume of the landfill, we might show that the lifespan of the landfill is 100 years. So we'll have to be really careful with how we use that data. If it shows that it's not consistent with the rest of the data that we have, or if there's a huge difference. But Jake's a smart guy, so he can figure all that out.
It's on you, Jake.
It all makes sense. Yeah, that sounds good, Tim. Makes sense.
There's the mother.
Okay, so do we need to approve that this would go forward in 2021 now? Is that, Hillary, would that be something we should do, and then we can just put it in the 2021 budget?
Well, I would wait for the fall survey drone, and that'll give us a sense of where we're going. I'm just worried right now there's going to be pickets involved there. I have to gear up with our personnel at the waste site, and I'm working towards that. That's my goal for 220, to train them, and then the following year, possibly after the drone, we'll see if this is the correct approach. Bury and fill right to the inch, and I can see a bunch of pickets, survey pickets out on the mound and to follow it. We can do that, but we're not ready yet.
Mhm.
Hillary, who operates the landfill? Is it a third-party contractor or is it chip staff?
It's all through staff.
Okay.
We had a transition now, the wayside attendant moved internally and now we have another, and it's all going well. So I think we have a little bit more training and stuff to do in this aspect.
Yeah, no, I just thought maybe that would be something that would drive the timing too, because the municipality that I showed the example for, they have a third-party contractor who does it. So what they did was they folded that document right into their tender specs for the contract, so that at the end of the contract, if the contractor, didn't comply with the slopes as proposed, it was his responsibility to reshape everything to meet the final closure slopes. Because we have the other communities where, we go to close a cell and we go for tender, and it turns out that, we have to spend almost $250,000 reshaping garbage that placed at 4-to-1 slopes to start with, right? So I was just wondering if you guys had a third-party contract, because that would be something that, if the contract was up, we'd want to try and make sure this fill plan was in place before that was delivered.
Councillor Bromwich?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Kind of a situation here. We have possibly a new approach where new personnel at the waste site that has to be trained. They should at least be aware that this is a concept that they might have to follow on a daily basis before they're actually put into motion. I don't know if there's an in-between here that we could train the new personnel in his day-to-day operation, that this is going to be you have to meet this specification, because it'd be an awful thing if he did it for a whole year and messed it up and had to go back and redo a whole contour of the dump site, where we have a chance with training going in right now. We could alert this individual that this is the way we want to do it from now on. Vary and fill as we go, and it'll save us millions of dollars actually in the long run over the period of the closure. So I don't know if it's timely or not. I wouldn't suggest that we go full bore on it, but at least it should be part of his in an initial training of what he might have to do at the dump. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I as well would like to see this continue. I think this is an excellent way to approach our landfill. It also shows that we're proactive in terms of that benzene issue, that this is something that if we could get this underway, we're doing everything we can to mitigate the leachate issues that we may be starting to see. And we don't want to end up in a position where we have to capture leachate. If we can cap and solidify that so that it's not a problem. I don't know, Hillary, can you put your thinking cap on and see if there isn't a way if we approved this, that this couldn't be made to happen over this year and next, because we could approve it this year.
Yes, for sure. Like, my fear is we get a document in front of us in 2 months and okay, now let's start burying and putting everything on grade. We have a ways to go. This is the answer, I'll tell you this right now, but not right at this moment. COVID, and I'm not blaming it on COVID, but there has been some challenges. So absolutely, this is the way of the future. I totally agree on this.
So I'm just wondering if we can sort of give it a few months before we actually had Tim and Jake work on this and then come forward, so that by next year you were ready to start. I think that's the idea that I'm hearing from certainly Councillor Bromwich. We don't want to let this go. We don't want to end up having garbage fill wrong areas or having to recontour. So the sooner we can get on it, the better. But we understand your issues.
Yes.
I'm wondering, Tim, do you think that's something that if council approved this today, could we kind of get into it in the late fall and be ready to be actually doing it next year?
Yeah, no, as with everything that we present the township, we're more than willing to work with you guys. Like we understand that, there's going to be financial considerations in anything. So, we're more than willing to tailor the programs. We put together what we have right now, just based on the way that we've always done things, type of thing. So if there's special considerations or budget or otherwise, operational, whatever you guys need, we're more than happy to work with the group. And Hillary and I, I think we have a good relationship. He may not like me, but
Why would you say that?
yeah, no, I think we work really, really well, and I'm more than happy to figure out some program that and timing that'll work for your group, your organization, and there might be other things that we can do as well. Jake and Christian and I have in the past have also ran more of a generic landfill operators course, and that might be something that we could do in the interim, if we don't want to go into this level of detail, because like Hillary said, this is going to be a very, very detailed document, and it's going to set grade stakes and stuff like that the operators have to work to. If we don't want to go to that level of detail right now, and maybe to just increase the level of confidence that council has in the operations out there, maybe that's what we do, is we just have a little couple hours training course with the operator so that they know what waste to accept and not to accept, and maybe just have a high level discussion about the implications of when things aren't followed to plan, what that means down the road as far as environmental concerns and financial concerns that are associated with it. And that's definitely something we can do. We're more than open to figure it out, and Hillary and I can bounce some ideas around if that makes more sense.
Hillary, do you want then to bring a recommendation on this back to council after you've had a chance to talk through timelines and training issues with Tim and Jake? Would you prefer
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Or rather than us actually giving you giving approval on this?
Yes.
Okay.
And where did that, just refresh my memory, the Radcliffe, is that coming back through a recommendation from me too, or how do you want to handle that one?
Sue is here somewhere, and I can't see her, but she's been writing up some recommendations in the background, because we have to approve all of the reports. I'm just going to say as amended, and then any little changes made are captured, and then there'd be a recommendation for council's consideration about the Radcliffe site. What am I missing? I guess that's the only one at the moment, the Radcliffe site as well.
It's the Radcliffe.
Have you bring back a recommendation to us about the closure of Bark Lake as we go?
The closure of Bark Lake,
As we go.
Oh, okay. Closure. Okay.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you two, you three of you work on that, and you can bring something back to us, Hillary. Is council okay with that at this point?
Yes.
Not seeing any objection.
No.
I don't know if Councillor Bromwich, are you okay with that, with bringing that back?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, as long as it comes back. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
I think council agrees it's the way to go. I'm not seeing any objection to that. Let's
It is
just
the way to go.
work it out with Tim and Jake.
Correct. Thank you.
Mayor Love?
Sue, there's
Yes.
Sue. Did you want to do the recommendations on what we've completed, and then we'll do the last item?
I can. I did have a question for council so that we don't lose sight of this concept of moving forward to a sequential fill plan. Did you want to have just a recommendation that council approves the concept? I do have a proposed wording for the operations manager to consider. That through the chair, that council would approve the concept and recommendation from Pynchon to include a sequential fill plan as part of the Bark Lake Waste WDS operations plan to develop a cell-based fill plan with volumes and associated site life for each cell and sequence to optimize the available volume at Bark Lake, and that such a plan would be phased in and further discussed prior to 2021.
Okay, yes, I know that works. I don't see any objection to that. So did you want to do the recommendations that you have that are ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with the reports then. I just want to tick these boxes so we don't miss anything and get to the last thing that we have to do.
Through the chair, the council approved the Bark Lake, Barry's Bay, PAUGH Lake, Radcliffe, and Wilno 2019 annual waste reports as amended, and that they be forwarded to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, MOECC, before the April 30th, 2020 deadline.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Is there any discussion on that recommendation? None. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, do you want to read the second one, Sue, please?
Absolutely. Through the chair, that council approved the recommendation from Pynchon to complete a detailed hydrogeological assessment at the Radcliffe site, including 3 new groundwater wells to delineate the quantified VOC concentrations at monitoring well BH52 at a cost of $22,500, and that it be paid from existing monitoring budgets and from landfill rehabilitation reserve.
Okay, so you've heard the recommendation. Could I get a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Bromwich. Is there any discussion on that recommendation? Not. Councillor Bromwich, did you? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Then all those in favor? And that's carried, yes, okay. And then the third one, Sue.
That council approve the concept and recommendation from Pynchon to include a sequential fill plan as part of the Bark Lake WDS operations plan to develop a cell-based fill plan with volumes and associated site life for each cell and sequence to optimize the available volume at Bark Lake, and that such a plan would be phased in and proposed for 2021.
Okay, could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Is there any discussion on that recommendation? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, there we go, Councillor Schulist. Thank you. Okay, that's carried. All right, our last piece is the landfill closure estimates. Has Amanda been able to join us? I can't see her.
Yes, she's on the call.
Okay. Tim, did you want to take us through the landfill closure estimates?
Yeah, for sure. So what we did was we estimated the closure costs associated with Bark Lake, as well as the post-closure liabilities associated with all the sites. So costs associated with closure include, like we've talked about, regrading, resloping the waste to MOE standards, application of the low permeability cover material, topsoil, vegetation, et cetera, even fencing, gates, road maintenance, all that types of things. Then the post-closure liability side is as a minimum, after a site's been capped, you have to monitor the site for a minimum of 25 years. if you see groundwater impacts at year 25, well, obviously you have to continue to extend the program. But for the purpose of these estimates, we've carried the 25 years minimum. And in the post-closure inspection periods, you also have to have a little bit of cost associated with having guys go out and inspect the cap and make sure the trees haven't uprooted and destroyed your cap. And if they do, have a little bit of contingency for, you know, having a bulldozer go out or a backhoe go out and recompact that soil and put some more topsoil down and that sort of thing. So those are the, you know, the costs. Oh, and then the big cost is that 25-year monitoring, groundwater monitoring and reporting. So those are more or less the costs that have been included in the assessments. So the MECP issues a document that determines what the inflation and discount rates are to be used for financial assurance for landfills. The township doesn't necessarily have to put up financial assurance like a private industry would have to do, but it is the accepted practice to use those MOE, you know, landfill financial assurance rates. So for 2019, they had an inflation rate of 2.03%, and they had a discount rate of 2.77%. And the 2.7%, you know, once you subtract the inflation from it, you end up with an actual true discount rate of 0.74% for the first 30 years. And if you have a site like Bark Lake, we're predicting that site between the operating phase and then the post-closure monitoring phase, that site's going to extend well beyond 30 years. At that point, you're allowed to apply a 3% discount rate for anything beyond 30 years. So those are some of the highlights of it. The Public Sector Accounting Board section PS 3270 document that provides guidance. It's a guidance document on how you actually do these assessments for you know, municipally run landfill sites. So this is just a summary of the sites. So we have Wilno. It was closed, you know, to accepting waste in 1997, but the final closure and the capping didn't happen until 2011, is our understanding. For PAUGH Lake, the same thing. It was closed in 2004, and final capping didn't happen until just recently. Bark Lake is active, so there's nothing really to talk about there. Radcliffe was closed in 2001 with the cap put on in 2006, and then Barry's Bay was closed, you know, in 1998 and formally capped in 2009. So all those dates are important because they really drive how many years you have left of monitoring. So this is a little summary table of the features that are at the site. So we'll know, you can see there's a 2 hectare approved landfill area. The cover is a soil cover. You know, for leachate management, the only thing we have there is monitoring wells. There's 10 of them. Surface water, we discontinued that program in 2014. And the in-place volume is estimated at 24,000 cubic meters. That's important to note because the volume in there, it factors into the contingency cost. They have a calculation based on the volume of waste at the site. You know, it's multiplied by a factor, and it gives you, you know, a contingency number that you have to carry. PAUGH Lake, again, a very small, you know, small footprint. And then you have the 11 wells. You have your 4 surface water stations. The in-place volume has been estimated based on the permit. This was the permitted volume, and that's full to capacity. Bark Lake, your active site is 2.7 hectares for an approved footprint. You have 23 wells on the go there, and you have 4 surface water stations. Right now, based on the pension survey, we're estimating there's about 77,000 cubic meters of waste currently in place. And the permitted volume at that site is 208,000 cubic meters. So as I've said a couple times, we're at about 35%. So when we look at the difference in those two volumes, you have about 130,000 cubic meters left of capacity at Bark Lake, and at a fill rate of just under 3,000. It's 130 divided by 3,000, so you're going to end up with about 45 years of life still at Bark Lake, as long as your waste deposition rate doesn't change too much. Radcliffe, largest footprint we have, smallest number of wells. This is the estimated volume that's in there. The permit actually is an old permit that doesn't specify the volume of waste that's supposed to be in there. Barry's Bay, we have a 0.6 hectare footprint, 10 wells. A very small volume of waste is actually estimated to be in the Barry's Bay site. So there's a number of assumptions, like I said, that factor into the estimates. For one, there's been a long-going assumption that even dates back to the previous consultant that Willow groundwater monitoring can be discontinued after 2020. We carried that estimate or that assumption through. And based on the findings of this report or this year's report, that's something that we're going to try and push forward. So this particular site, this might be the last year we have to sample it. So that's a beautiful thing, and we can potentially take the liability associated with this site off the table altogether. PAUGH Lake is going to be discontinued after 2025. Bark Lake is at 35% capacity. It has an estimated about 47 years left, followed by an additional 25-year post-closure monitoring period. Radcliffe, it's currently estimated that monitoring is going to discontinue after 2031. We'll have to see what the findings of our VOC study show. If we can show that it's a discontinuous plume from the source, maybe that is something valid. If not, that might have to change, and that would affect your financial estimates further down the road. But for now, I've carried it out that it's just going to be another 12 years of monitoring. And Barry's Bay, the assumption is that it's going to be discontinued after 2035, which is unfortunate because that site, it doesn't look like that site had received waste from before 2000, but because it wasn't formally closed in the MOE's eyes, it's the one that's going to extend out the longest. Well, not the longest, but the longest of your closed sites. This is just a summary. So in 2018, this column here shows the number for 2018, what was carried for each individual site, and the total liability estimate. So when we look at 2019 and we apply all the other factors, the interest rates and how that feeds into and how the volumes feed into the contingency numbers and that sort of thing, the number we're carrying for 2019 or 2020 is about 16,000. So if we do the monitoring this year, and in the future we don't have to do any more monitoring, nobody has to go look at the slopes, we don't have to worry about the fencing so much anymore, blah blah blah, we could potentially take this one off the table after 2020 if the MOE agrees that we're done out there. And And that's why there's the reduction from year to year. Similarly, for PAUGH Lake, there's a reduction there, again, based on the fact that we're in the post-closure phase now. And every year that we do monitoring and we find that there's no issues, we're able to chew into that money, because we just don't need that much left on the table, because we're eating into that 25-year period. For Bark Lake, this is the one that you see the most significant change in liability. That change is pretty much related to the fact that we have more accurate data. Now we know what the volumes are that are in there. We have a more accurate idea of what the waste generation rate is. So again, like that all factors into the duration of the landfill and how these costs are, you know, I'm not an accountant, but quote unquote amortized over the entire life, as opposed to, so you will see big changes in Bark Lake for the next couple of years until we're able to get a really good handle on how much waste goes in there, because that's really going to drive the lifespan.
Tim, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
All right. So if we were to move on this cell closure system that you had proposed earlier, this is where we would see a change or an effect to the liability estimates, because we wouldn't be working on the actual closure in like segmented cells.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or am I missing that?
Yeah, for sure. So can I double back to that at the end, and I'll show you guys how that plays out.
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. So Radcliffe, same sort of thing. We're in the post-closure phase. Like I said earlier, though, this does not factor in yet the additional costs that are associated with, you know, ongoing monitoring at Radcliffe, you know, based on because I just don't know right now. So I don't want to assume that it's going to be, you know, 10,000 a year for the next 4 years or for the next 24 years or anything like that. So I just left it kind of as is with the same assumptions for right now. And I've got my fingers crossed that when we do the work, we're going to see that it's not a great big benzene plume. And, but that might be something, you know, just to give you guys a heads up. If we see the problems, the situation out there is problematic, then that number might have to increase. And Barry's Bay, again, it's a closed landfill site, so those costs are almost all associated with post-closure inspection and post-closure monitoring. So every year that goes by, you're going to see that number whittle down and whittle down. So, and especially if we continue to see good water quality results like we've seen there. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to just stop this share for a minute. I want to share, I'm going to share the liability estimates report. Because in this, did it work?
Yes, we've got it.
Yeah, it says revised 2 on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm just going to go down to the tables and hopefully we can see this with our old eyes. Okay, so for Bark Lake, you can see here, there's some estimates that we've got in here, right? So the first line.
Tim, it went off your screen there.
Yeah, it just went off, Tim. I was just looking to see where it went.
Okay. Oh, it's just because I tried to move it.
There it is.
So I can see
Here we
it.
go.
Jake, you're such a good wingman. All right. Okay, Bark Lake. So, so these are the closure costs associated with Bark Lake. So the first line item is regrading of the waste cells. So we have the footprint of the, you know, the footprint of the landfill is 2.78 hectares. So we've converted that into cubic meters. We have an estimate of what it costs to get a guy on a bulldozer and push garbage around and do the shaping that we think would have to be shaped if we didn't, you know, if we didn't do the sequential fill plan, if we just let the guys kind of loose out there and then we'll just worry about it at the end. You know what I mean? So yeah, you end up with like almost $250,000 in reshaping and making sure everything's going to be at 4-to-1 and 20-to-1 and blah blah blah. So then you have to apply the present value factor and all that stuff. So the present value cost associated with that particular line item becomes $60,000. Now, if we were to do the sequential fill plan and Hillary was able to get the staff to, you know, really buy into this, we could make the argument that this particular line item is something that's being done as part of the operations. So this is not a closure cost anymore. This now comes out, right? So that's something that can come out. And then the same thing with the leveling layer and the landfill cap and vegetation. If as the boys reach, you know, the final contours, we actually apply a landfill cap and vegetative cover, we could potentially apply a factor to this line item that says that, you know, as we move along, sorry, these two line items, as we move along, well, the landfill is now 10% capped and closed. Well, we can reduce these numbers as well, right? So that sequential fill plan just allows us the tool to make sure that this is done. And you could do it without the sequential fill plan. It would just be a lot harder to justify that, you know, you would really have to be able to prove where are you in your landfill life? What areas of the landfill are closed and capped? How do we know they're at the right, you know, elevations, blah, blah, blah. So it just makes things really, really difficult if there's no, you know, formal plan that the boys are following. So you can see the numbers here down at the bottom that are associated with, you know, the landfill closure cost for Bark Lake. So we've estimated the entire closure cost for Bark Lake would be $1.6 million. Now you guys don't need to worry about that all today, obviously, because it's a factorized based on how much waste is already in the landfill. So if you go to the second page of the Bark Lake, so now you're into the closure care section. You know, we talk about you know, doing inspections of the cover and inspecting the roadways. You know, once you're in because once you're closed, there's going to be nobody there, but you still have to have access to it in case there is a leachate breakout or there is some kind of problem. So what we've done there is, you know, we've just applied a 5% to the estimated capital cost. You know, it's very, very small. The numbers are small. And especially once you start to look at your net present value numbers and that sort of thing. So yeah, when you work your way through this entire list of all the stuff that's in here and your monitoring program is in here, like how much does it cost just for this particular site? And then, and this is the contingency number I was talking about here, the calculated landfill standards for financial assurance. You have to take the volume of the landfill and factor in the contingency costs. And then as you go, you know, you work your way down the table, there's a lot of buried and hidden formulas that are in here, but you have this capacity factor, which essentially is how much of the landfill have you occupied or used. So we've used 35%. So that what, you know, that was our biggest change, is we're more accurate on that number. So factorized expenditure is, you know, $221,000 as opposed to the 300,000 that was estimated last year. And these numbers will change. These numbers will bounce around. It's going to be really interesting to how they change with the pandemic and the effect that it's going to have on interest rates and discount rates. And we might not even see it this coming year, but because most of it's based on a 10-year average, but we are going to see, probably the following year, we'll probably see some effects, and in that I expect those rates are going to, the interest rate for sure is going to drop, and maybe the discount rate will increase for us. Does that clear anything up?
Tim, maybe it sort of, and it also is somewhat muddy. Could you go back to the Bark Lake 2019 closure care cost estimate, the one that you showed us that had 1.69 million?
Yeah.
So that's the cost in 2019. If we were to do her today, that'd be what you're estimating it would cost, correct?
That's correct.
So what is the present value cost? Can you define that for me in really simple language? Because it's so much less than the 1.6.
Okay.
60,000.
Yeah.
What does that actually represent?
So, thought I had that defined in here, but so I guess the best way to describe it is the way that it's calculated is you take the costs of everything. Anyways, you take the cost of everything, all the activities, and you look at the number of years that are going to pass before those events happen.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up just, you have to apply that inflation factor as well as the discount rates. And then at the end of it, it gives you the net present value factor of it. So it's like the ratio of what the dollar will be worth type of thing.
So okay, so I'm going to try to what I'm hearing is this. If I had 460,000 some odd dollars today that I was investing, is that going to give me, when we came to close Bark Lake, if we decided to close it as per this plan, would that give me the money I'd need at that point to close it? Is it that idea?
Yes, yeah, that's the way I'm going to use, that's the definition I'm going to use in the future. Perfect.
Okay, so what you're showing us is what it would cost today, which is the 1.69 million. What it's going to cost in the future has inflation, it has interest on that investment, and all those other factors involved. And this thing is calculating out, if I had that money, that 460,000 in my reserve today and was investing it properly, I'd be ready for the future.
Correct.
Okay, that really helps, because I think that, you guys understand the formulas, but from a perspective of members of council, to understand this, it seems confusing or counterintuitive that you tell us something cost this in 2019, but in the future, when we get it done, it's only going to cost a whole bunch less. But the reality is that's the money we have to invest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happens here, if we were to drill into the formulas, the $600,000 one here that I'm trying to highlight, that's your 460,000 from the previous page, plus your post-closure monitoring. So that gets you your 620,000. And then it's factorized based on how much of the volume you've actually used. Because if we wanted to go close it today, theoretically, it shouldn't cost us as much because we don't have all that garbage in there. So it wouldn't cost as much to reshape it, and we wouldn't have to, the landfill cap shouldn't extend as far, and there should be a reduction based on the volume of materials that we need to cap and close, and the materials that we need to bring in. So yeah, but that's a great description of what it is if you guys had that money set aside, you'd be in good shape.
Okay, it gives council some sense of how to target ensuring we have enough money in reserves. And I'm assuming, based on all your calculations, that's if nothing goes wrong, because you can't estimate what may or may not go wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so in the best case scenario, if everything remains good, that's what we're looking at when we look at that total you gave us, the changes.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps me understand it a lot better. I hope that helps council understand it a bit better.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anyone have any questions on this then at this point? I think the interesting thing, Tim, is that looking at the charts, the tables you gave us in the report, it's a bit confusing that even though it takes 25 years to be done monitoring a landfill, that one like Wilno, which was only capped in 2011, I'm not sure why the year ending is 2020. So is that part of the art of knowing what's going on and when you hope to be able to cease monitoring, for example? There must be some
Yes.
sort of knowledge that goes into these sort of decisions, because they don't seem to be cut and dried.
Yeah, so I think for Wilno, I think the argument there was because it was closed in 1997, if you were at 25 years to that, that puts you to 2022 or whatever. So I think that's the rationale that they used was they used the date that the last bit of garbage was accepted on site, and maybe they were I don't know if that's been formally approved or not. I mean, that's the argument that we'll have to have with the MOE, and hopefully the data is going to continue to support that. And then, but Barry's Bay is one that we could potentially have the same argument. It was actually formally capped 2 years before Wilno was. And it started to stopped receiving waste like 1 year after. So that's we might be able to have the discussion with the MOE and say, okay, we want to stop sampling there, and then where does that, maybe the sampling doesn't go out to 2035 anymore. Maybe that's one that we could stop in 2025. The other thing that we haven't factored in yet, because we just don't know, is what the effects of going to biannual reporting would be. That's obviously going to drive the monitoring costs and the reporting costs down. So you'll see those factors play their way through as well. So every time that we can save you guys, there's going to be the sites like Radcliffe where you have to spend money every once in a while, and there's the risk that that program might have to get beefed up a little bit for the next couple of years. But at the same time, Jake and I are always looking for opportunity, and Hillary's harassing us sometimes to look for opportunities to try and slim these programs out if we can justify it through the data, right? And I think we do, we try and do the best we can to have something that's scientifically defensible. I don't want to ever put the township in a position that we're going to the MOE and saying, we've been sampling this for a long time, how will we just stop? They don't really care about how much money you have to spend or your feelings. Like they want the science, and that's what we're really working on is putting the science behind these decisions, so that if push comes to shove and we have to have a debate, we're in a great position to have that.
Okay, does council have any questions at this point then, now that that's starting to make a little more sense to us? Amanda, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I have a follow-up on the sequential fill plan. So my understanding is if we implement something like that, the operational costs will increase because we're experiencing some of those liabilities ahead of time in the actual year that they're happening. Right, so that's something we need to consider.
Yes and no. I mean, we did a sequential fill plan for the city of Timmins, and that particular site, they allow the public on the waste. Like the guys drive up to the top, and they have like a little roundabout road, and people dump their garbage right out of the back of their truck. And we found that they had a huge active tipping phase, and it required, like, them to have cover material on hand to make sure that there wasn't lots of windblown litter. And if their supervisor went on holidays for a week and that wasn't being done up to standard, they were always having to hire laborers to go pick up windblown litter. And I mean, they had a very, very strict MOE officer who just liked to see things a certain way. But in the end, through that fill plan, we were able to focus them on, like, this is your public area where people are going to go dump their garbage bags right out of their truck. It's going to be a very small, focused area. Over here is your larger truck area where your garbage trucks, your collection trucks come in. This is where they're going to dump. So we tried to keep those two people away from each other so that we mitigated the risk, injuries and stuff like that. And yeah, in the end, we were able to running like clockwork right now. Like, I don't know that they see much of a difference in operational costs. The guys now have a really good understanding of, put the garbage out in 1 foot lifts, make sure you get your compaction, and come up at a 4-to-1 slope, and it's just working really, really well there. So in the beginning, there might be a little bit of growing pains, but I think it'll be offset by the fact that you're going to have a better operation. You're going to have better compaction of waste, increased volume, increased lifespan. So.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions for Tim on the landfill closure estimates? Not seeing any. Hillary, are you good? Yes or no? Oh, your mic's not on.
I just noticed that. I'm sorry. Everything's good. Perfect. Wonderful.
Okay. Well, this has been really great, Tim. I don't know. I can't see if Jake is still here. But having the two of you here and able to explain all this to council has been really, really helpful and informative. And I certainly appreciate it. I think staff also appreciates that you're educating us as we go. And, you've certainly presented us with a lot of good information. And I think, Sue, have we covered everything that we needed a recommendation for? I don't think the last one we needed one, did we?
No, we are fine.
Okay. So if there's nothing further for Tim and Jake, then how about we thank them for helping us and we maybe take a lunch break. I don't know about council, but I'm certainly ready.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm going to suggest is we take a lunch break until 1:30 and we come back and complete this. That's 40 minutes, which might give staff a little bit of time to be able to have a lunch as well. So could I get a mover that we take a lunch break until 1:30? And of course, I can't see everybody. Moved by Councillor Schulist, seconded by, I can't see Mark. Councillor Bromwich, it has to be you because I can't see Mark. Favor. And I'm hoping it's, okay, 1 second. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. And that's carried. We're going to take a lunch break till 1:30. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen. We really appreciate it. It was very informative.